Hi, welcome back to Weatherford Daze. I'm Rachel. This is Jason. We are the Weatherfords, and we are in a daze.
See, now you know why we're called that. Yeah, exactly.
We're thrilled that you are choosing to spend part of your day with us today, and we are in quite a fun little series this month.
Just started it, but we started off with a bang with Phantom of the Opera.
Yes, so we are doing some of the plays of Andrew Lloyd Webber this month, and last week we started with our favorite, which is Phantom of the Opera, arguably the best by most everyone. However, today's is probably my second favorite of all of his. So, and that just comes from, we talked about it a little bit last week, but I discovered these in the library in CD format. So I just had the music. I didn't actually have the visuals to these. And I think that helped with my love for these. So we're going to talk about that today and get a little bit deeper into the love and the good, and then there's some bad, arguably too. So
what's today's musical?
Joseph. I didn't say again. Oh my goodness.
And the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat.
That was really awkward.
Expect nothing less.
Exactly.
Yes.
Okay, well, with that. So, this one, with Phantom of the Opera, there was some great source material, right? But we could actually talk about the source material and, our feelings about that. With this one, the source material is the Bible. And really, there's no better source material, right?
Well, let's put it this way. You just said something about source material. You can monkey around with the source material a little bit when it comes to Phantom of the Opera, or we'll find, a poem about cats. You can do whatever you want. You have some freedom. And you might offend one person out there that goes, this is just a hardcore Gaston Leroux fan, and you didn't have the who was the Persian? You didn't have the Persian guy in there. I'm just going to sit there and just be in a huff. But this is the Bible. I don't know if you know this, but there's whole religious movements. There's three or more really big ones that are and they kind of take it seriously. It's not something to kind of take too lightly, and so that can be a downside with doing biblical material. I think fiction as well. Good.
I think it is interesting that this was made, which looking into this was made to be a school-aged, or performed it for a school, right?
Before it went on Broadway, yeah.
Right. So, it was originally for a Catholic school, which kind of makes a little bit more sense why he chose to do this. But it was kind of in part, he didn't do the entire thing at first. He had just done a few songs from it. And then
it was 30 minutes long. It wasn't, they didn't expand a lot of the songs.
So it was a very shortened version. And then after Jesus Christ Superstar, which we're going to be talking about next week, and its success, he came back and expanded Joseph. So, yeah, and there's some interesting choices made with this.
Lots of performances. It looks 700 some odd performances on Broadway, at least the first run. That's a lot.
And I will say, from my experience, how well you actually like this play is probably going to depend on, one, how seriously you take the source material, and also who you see it performed by. If your only exposure to this is the movie production
Is that the one
starring Donny Osmond.
Yes, that's one that me and my daughter saw.
You may absolutely hate this production. And I don't necessarily blame you if that's your only exposure to it. Like I said, I heard the music first and then went to see it done on stage. And the production that I saw on stage, it was really tastefully done. And then I also saw it was last year? Last year, our church has a theater that is associated, and like our church hosts the theater. And our daughter got to be in the production of Joseph as well. So that one was, again, really well done. I will say it wasn't as tasteful in the costuming as the first play that I saw done, but it comes nowhere near the level of just ick that the movie does. And all of this through kind of the lens of, this is supposed to be family friendly. It's supposed to be something that you're able to bring your children to. I mean, obviously, when you're looking at the Bible, there's always kind of this thing of, the Bible wasn't necessarily written with the way that we, try to screen for childhood in mind. The Bible was just telling these stories raw and real and as they happened. And it's kind of up to parents to filter that according to the age and the sensitivity of your children, and I think that that's a very serious and real thing that parents have to do. And we start in church, we'll tell the story of Joseph to our 1 and 2 year olds. And, but as they get older, you start filling in more details and the discussion gets deeper.
I do think that there is a precedent for that. When you were talking about that, I went in my mind, I don't know how historically accurate this is, but I do know there's some elements that, okay, so I was looking at, like, let's say an older father kind of figure or a rabbi in the times after Joseph in Israel. Mm-hmm. You could see almost the little kid saying, Rabbi, tell us the story of Joseph. He would tell the story of Joseph in his own way, and he would, tell them how they can understand. But when they go to Hebrew school, mm-hmm. when they have the actual the Tanakh, they actually have the books, and they're going through the scroll, and it's very systematized. They're going to read it in the original Hebrew, mm-hmm. and they're going to know exactly what it said, and they're expected to have more of a respect for the material, and to kind of go, this is what it says. You're growing up to be a young man now. You need to understand these things, and there's a maturity that you're having to step into. Yeah. So honestly, when you said that, I was like, we do that for our kids in a way. Mm-hmm. We just don't put them through Hebrew school. That's the difference. But I don't think you would take a little 2-year-old and go, here's a copy of the scroll of, and then they have to go through it. So I think there's a little bit of that we do.
And I think that when it comes to the church and to productions like this, which you look at, this was done in a school, a Catholic school. This has been done, by churches, and then it's been done just by general theaters. I think that there's definitely, a difference in the way that different, based on where they're at, how they're going to portray this story. And yet I wish that there was kind of a standard that was a little bit more universal, just going, this one is safe for any age, and it's not going to be taking, liberties with the costuming and some of the choices in how
there's one thing that is
presented. Somewhat
standardized in it. It's the music and
mm-hmm.
some of the comedy choices. So if you don't like the fact that they kind of, there's a scene where the brothers come in and they're singing kind of a country western style song about telling the father that their son is dead, and that's like
One More Angel in Heaven.
One More Angel in Heaven. Thank you.
I have to say that's probably the worst song out of all of them, for sure.
Knowing my wife and knowing how much she loves country music, that is, and the twang and the voice, I can hear it and not want to, want the world to end. But I think that
don't want the world to end.
I mean, country music.
I mean, that's the thing. I can appreciate all the fact that, Joseph, if you don't know, it has multiple different musical genres represented in all of these different songs. And I mean, the One More Angel in Heaven, and then there's
Canaan Daze is done.
Canaan Daze, I think is fine. I mean, I enjoy that one. The one that I don't really like is the Calypso, like the Benjamin. Oh no, not he.
Yeah.
That one again is one that I think they just went a little bit too far over the top. It's just musically not really interesting. I think there's some caricatures that you can just be over the top with, like the Elvis one.
Yeah.
And then some that it's just like, why did you do that?
It's almost like they had like a random hat, and they just went and pulled up musical genres like one of those improv shows.
But overall, if you have children, and children are a part of this, there's adult actors, but they have a children's choir, so typically any production is going to have children in this. It's fun to be learning all these different styles of music and, be telling a story through it too. A very familiar story to most kids, at least if they've been raised in church. This is one of the ones that really is just so child friendly. It captivates children, but you're hearing, the story of this young boy who grows and, experiences all of these different trials, and yet God is with him through it all. And how he's raised from a slave to, second in command of an empire. And, how he is able to, and then the themes of, forgiveness and reconciliation that you have there. And, all of those are just such good themes to be able to teach to a child. And yet, I feel like, maybe the whole theme that Andrew Lloyd Webber focuses on, which is being a dreamer or having a dream, is not necessarily the actual, important part of the story of Joseph.
The ability to know someone's dreams and to interpret them and to have dreams, actual prophetic dreams of their own, is not a skill that you just are a talent that you have. It is something that's given supernaturally by God, Yahweh. And I would have to watch it again or listen to the songs to pick out when he actually says the word God or Adonai or anything like that. Yeah. And it's not really in there. So what you're left with is someone who has a dream. He's got a talent. Oh, he's going to be a big celebrity. Mm-hmm. And it's like, that is not at all the character of Joseph.
The worst line in the entire play. Anyone from anywhere can make it if they have a lucky break. That is not.
It was not
the
luck.
Message
it was
of Joseph.
It was the providence of God. And here's the thing: if that break was lucky, then give me all the unluck in the world, because Joseph got thrown into prison. Mm-hmm. Joseph could have been this close to death, but it's due to God's providence and God putting him where he needed to be to accomplish the goals. And he saved Israel. Would we have Israel today if God did not move in this man's life? Probably not. It wouldn't be in the same place that it was. So that says that might be a fun story, sure, but this is pivotal. This is pivotal in the same way that Moses was pivotal. The story of Moses and everything around that is still touched on today in the lives of Jews today. Just like so they take these stories seriously, as well they should, and Christians do as well. So it depends on how you go with the fact they're doing humor with it. Are you okay with that? Then.
And that's the thing. I think that it could be done, that there's room within Andrew Lloyd Webber's music and the story that's being told to be able to tell it in a good way. I think that I've seen it done well. There's some of the choices that they made with Donny Osmond where it's just, you see him painted as kind of insufferably arrogant, and he doesn't lose that the entire, like, he doesn't learn.
Yeah.
And that was a choice.
There are some of those elements of Joseph's, kind of attitude in the very beginning in the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
And that changes. But you're right, Donny Osmond's Joseph, the only time you ever see him really like knock down a peg is when he is in prison and he's praying. But that's very quickly.
And that's where you get the most beautiful song in the entire
It is very nice.
Play
very
is the Close Every Door to Me. And that one really does make the entire play. It really does. It's like, oh, okay, I'm actually seeing something very mournful. The music sounds very, it has some Jewish elements to it. I mean, it's not, traditionally.
There's
themes in
sound
there.
Motifs, yeah.
Right. And
who closes doors? God opens and closes doors, so God's in there.
And that's probably the one that actually talks about, where they're coming from the most. You have children of Israel are never alone,
So why aren't they alone? Because of God. But they just don't quite come out and say it. But you have to forgive them, I guess.
It's so close.
Yeah.
It's so very close to having God in it. But again, the movie, it's like the only portrayal you see of God is there's this old man that kind of comes out on stage and dances around during one of the scenes with the narrator and Joseph, and it's like, is that supposed to be God?
It was Jacob.
No. That's like that's in the Go 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 Joseph scene, which is right after he does the Close Every Door to Me. So he's praying, he's in this very down, state, and then the narrator's like, we've read the book and everything, and you turn out on top, and she actually does pull out a Bible at one point. So there is very clearly reference to, where they're getting the story from. And I think that the old man in that scene is supposed to represent God.
Well,
but again, that's not in every stage production.
I didn't notice that. Comedy can many times use a meta narrative. And the fact that the narrator says, we've read the book and we know you come out on top, or your name's on the marquee.
I don't know that they necessarily intended this to be a comedy. It takes itself pretty seriously, even though it's lighthearted and fun. At some points, there's seriousness too. And it ends with this, I think that it's supposed to be inspiring to children. That's the main, idea of it. I don't think that it's meant to be a comedy.
It's lighthearted in the way that they, in some ways.
Yeah.
I mean, the whole thing with the goat and it's like this.
Again, a lot of that is the artistic choices that were in the movie.
You have to kind of just go, okay, listen to the songs and cover your eyes and go, what do you imagine
Whereas
in your head?
if you actually look at just the music, or look at at the way that, different stage productions have told it, it's not portrayed as a comedy.
You're saying that those comic elements are not baked in.
Right, no. That was when they chose to do the movie, they added in those elements that made it a little bit more slapstick and a little bit more comedic at times. Like they amped that up.
Very similar to the way that you said.
Which is why it feels like it's pulling against each other.
Yeah.
In the movie, where you're just kind of sitting there going, what on earth is happening? Why do we have this story of a Hebrew, and then we're jumping from thing to thing to thing, and then all of a sudden we're in these really garish Egyptian costumes with like an orgy going on screen in a child's movie.
Yeah.
Which, when you watched it with our daughter, our 16-year-old daughter ran out of the room going, no, and she had seen the play.
I did not know what to expect.
And she's going, oh no, that's awful. What are we watching?
You mentioned something, we were like, okay, well, our kids in Phantom of the Opera, and you said you wanted them to see the other one with Sarah Brightman and Michael Crawford. And the one that we saw was with a actress and actor that I wasn't familiar with, but I thought it was pretty good. But I think that some of the choices they made amped up the sensuality a little bit. And so, but some of those elements can be suggested in the lyrics and some of the staging, but it's all in how the producers do it. And that's kind of what I was getting at is some of those elements I think I'm letting the production, the individual production choices color how I see the music a little bit. And can you blame me? I mean, I haven't seen it portrayed too many times.
It makes sense to do that. And I think that that's very much going to be what most people do. It really does depend on where did you hear it first.
Yeah.
And as far as how much you like it. And then again, how, where are you coming from in the first place? If, you're coming from a more worldly perspective and you're an adult and, and you see this production and you have no idea of, kind of the sacredness of the text, and you're just looking at it as far as story and a fun ride, you may love it. If you're someone that is coming from, a more conservative background and that really values the holiness of the text and is going, wow, you took this story that is supposed to be showing God and how God took and protected his people during this desperate time. Because, if anything, this is a story of God's provision for his people.
Right.
And also him positioning them for, where he wanted his people to be. Because them going from Canaan to Egypt was not an accident. That was what he wanted them to do, where he wanted them to be. And how he was going to then, after the Egyptians, over the course of many years, forgot Joseph, forgot why the Israelites were there in their midst, and then they enslaved them as a people. And, that set them up to then be drawn out of Egypt. And there's so much to the story of how God protected and moved his people from one place to another, and how he used dreams and being able to interpret dreams, knowing something that it's the way that he proved that he was real to these other nations that had many other gods and many other belief systems, and yet, the gods of the Hebrews, of the Israelites, the God of the Israelites had this knowledge into the dreams of these rulers that gave them, foreknowledge to be able to prepare in these different situations. You see that both with Joseph and with Daniel.
I was just going to mention that. I'm glad you brought it up.
Yeah. And that was, it's such an integral part of how God showed himself, not only to his own people, but to the nations throughout history. This was something that set them apart. You had all of the wise men that the king counted on for advice. They couldn't give him the interpretation. Joseph could. And that was something that wasn't just a little talent and a little trick that Joseph had, that he had to ask and he had to ask the king, to tell it to him again, right? In the play, it's like, oh, I didn't get it the first time. Why don't you give it to me again? And it's like, no.
That was for the people in the back row that didn't catch the song the first time they did the chorus. It's a chorus. It's a repetition. So that's they're kind of inventing reasons to do it.
But ultimately, it kind of does show that Andrew Lloyd Webber had a great gift for music. But when he touched on these different things, he just tended to miss the message and what to actually focus on. And it's sad. I guess I'm left with, I want the story of Joseph to be done better.
There was that. There was the animated Joseph, and that one was like a musical, but they were trying to do it as an answer to Prince of Egypt. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. See, now Prince of Egypt just was so beautifully done.
They take it seriously, and other than the scene with the Pharaoh's wizards, or whatever you want to call them, most everything is very.
But that's a very cool scene.
Yes, it is. But you have things like the voice of God. You have the plagues. You have the splitting of the Red Sea. You have all these things where God shows mightily, and I don't think it ever goes. Aaron comes up to Moses and says, "What a lucky break we had."
Yeah.
You're so talented. In fact, Moses points out, not to belabor that point, but Moses points out the fact, he says, "I'm not talented. I don't have speech. My tongue trips up or whatever. What am I going to do?" And he says, "I will speak for you." So there's an element of where you are lacking in your own talent. I am going to be the power that you could never bring to it yourself. And that, if anything, the Bible is replete with that. Of, we can't do it. And he's the author and finisher. We can't do it in our own strength. But when we obey and when we lay down what we want and let him speak through us, you've got history being made. But if you're a celebrity and you've got lucky break and all this kind of stuff and your name's on the marquee and isn't that nice? It's not quite how that works. He's like, I'm really good at running things. I'm a good businessman and it's, I'll make you the second in command over Egypt because you've got that bureaucratic. No. God made all that stuff happen.
God gave him favor. It's like we might look at that and say, oh, it was a lucky break. But the Bible makes it very clear that God was
Providence.
Positioning him in every circumstance. Even when he was thrown in prison.
Down and out.
That was where God needed him to be so that then the next step could happen.
How many great things happen when God, strangely enough, God puts some of his people in prison or allows that to happen.
If he had stayed in Potiphar's house, he wouldn't have met the people that then, interpreting then their dreams led him to Pharaoh. Like, it just, all of these steps were necessary for his journey, for him to be in the position where he could then save his family from famine, and also save all of the Egyptians, that like so many people would have died, and God provided through Joseph being thrown in prison. So, yeah, I think that obviously he misses the mark on what the actual purpose of the story and the meaning was supposed to be. But at the same time, I've seen stories that were perverted far more.
Yeah.
Distorted far more. Should we say that?
Well, let's put it this way. It did not mention God that much, but when you see, and we will talk about this, when we talk about Jesus Christ Superstar, when he starts to talk about God and starts to talk about those kind of things and go into those more theological elements, you're like, yeah, no, he doesn't understand it there either. So you're almost thankful for the fact that Joseph doesn't mention God all that much. You're like, that's probably a bullet that got dodged. I just thought that. Does that make sense?
But with all that, I mean, there's some, he's obviously very talented, very gifted songwriter. He has some beautiful things. Overall, I mean...
A lot of the lyrics are Tim Rice, though, mostly, so...
But as far as, music and his gifting and his talent, you see his abilities, and he's brought us some beautiful music. And I do like Joseph. Yes, it is lighthearted. Yes, it misses the meaning, the moral that's supposed to be there, but it's something that you can, I think, as long as you see the right production of it that doesn't follow the movie, that, and my biggest issue with that is just the costuming choices were horrible in the movie. But it's something that you can take your kids to, and then you can add to it. You can go, yes, and. The music is, something that will get stuck in your head, and there's truth in the story. And that's kind of the thing of, you look at, the word doesn't go out and come back void, right?
Right.
There's the ability, even when the world gets a hold of a Bible story to tell it, and they kind of miss the mark, there's still nuggets of truth that can be found in there that you can then go, oh yeah, well, you know this story from this play, right? And, well, here, let me tell you what it actually means. And, that it presents kind of this foot in the door of people that would never be caught dead in a church, to then hear a Bible story and be intrigued by it, and you can then kind of lead into it. And I think that's, there's good.
I think with Joseph, yes, and is a good phrase that you said, because you can say, yes, that did happen with Joseph, and there's deeper meaning to it that's in the original. With Jesus Christ Superstar, it's no but, because you're like, no, but, and so not through adding additional depth or seeking additional depth there, you're basically going, I'm going to teach you about Jesus Christ by correcting.
We're going to talk more about that next week, right?
Uh-huh.
Hold you back. Focus on Joseph. I mean, I think that one of the things that I kind of pulled from this was really just musing on how do you present a story for children, and what are the guidelines that people need to have, because And I'm sitting here just going, I am squeamish about some of these choices that are made with costuming, and yet I know so many people that would go, Rachel, you're being a prude. Why are you even, why is this a big deal? Or, oh, our kids see worse at church, at school with their peers, whatever, and it's like, I don't know, it just kind of struck me as how much of a standard should we be pushing for in the church still? I feel like some of the things we keep kind of pushing the standards more and more. And there's a certain level of, do we just give up? Or is there still a standard that should be maintained in what we put on stage?
How often do you let the band leader be the culture? They set the tempo. They set the moves. Why are we letting them be the direction? Even when someone says, "Oh, well, we like to have a little bit of entertainment." Okay, there's lasers and fog and light shows and all this kind of stuff, and you're like, okay, how much are you mimicking what concerts do? And how is that? How is there a biblical through line with that? With what we do with church? When do you redeem the culture and take those elements and redeem them? I've seen, I was thinking about rap music, and we got Justin rapping in church. I have no problem with that because all the elements of the worldly elements of rap were not in that. What was in that was the skill. Mm-hmm. and the method, and it was not the worldliness that this stuff that has been caked onto it. So cultural redemption or redeeming the world is better than letting than the alternative.
To me, it's like there's a difference when you go, we as if you're saying the band leader, typically the band has a uniform. They're not going, everybody that's in the band has to have this uniform and there's a standard. Whereas if you're in the audience, you don't have a standard for the audience. There's no dress code to be able to get in, and I think that as Christians, that kind of is the model. We don't have a dress code for who wants to walk into our church. You are welcome here, and because God accepts you in whatever state you're in. But there's something to be said for, you don't put somebody up on stage that doesn't have kind of a standard. You have a standard for what the people are going to be wearing so that what they're wearing doesn't become a distraction from the message that's being taught, right? But I feel like, I don't know, I have a very different background than a lot of people do because I was raised in a very conservative church. And so my standards, are different from a lot of other people. So when I'm going, even in our church, some of the costuming choices for Joseph I felt were questionable. I also I realize that people, other people are going to look at me for making that statement like I'm coming from a completely different planet. And, it's just kind of one of those where I'm going, I don't know how to get across, my heart for we need to have standards as far as in how we dress and how we look and, what we're putting on our stage as Christians that does, and the heart of it is just not to distract from the message that we're giving. And I think that, when you look at the biblical standard of modesty in a woman, the Bible said that when a woman adorned herself with, it was about the jewelry and the flashy, the flashiness of it, that that really kind of speaks to your heart and where you're putting your emphasis, right? It's talking about cosmetics and jewelry versus, the clothing choices or the modesty. Whereas, a lot of times in churches you'll have like, your shorts or skirt has to be knee length, or your shoulders covered or whatever. And it's like, and those kind of cultural standards keep on shifting and moving, and it's like nobody can ever agree on what the standards do need to be.
Right.
And wow, I'm going very far from Joseph. I hope you forgive me, but it's just, some of the musings that happen. But I think that, the heart of it all does come back to, when you're talking about the flashy and the gaudy, it's like, where is your heart? And is your heart fixed on God? And are you being a distraction not only to others but to yourself from the humble spirit, from the, we're here not to exalt ourselves but to point others towards God. And if anything that you're wearing or any way that you are acting, man or woman, is drawing attention to me, rather than pointing towards God, then you have a problem. And in that, it's like, that goes back to Joseph, the issue is not only with the costuming in some of the scenes, but the fact that the very heart of it, Joseph is going me, and he's not pointing to God. And in all of that, it's like we're wrapping this together with just, there's so many distractions that we're getting away from pointing people towards God, which should have been the message of Joseph in the first place. Did I wrap that up neatly with a bow?
I think so.
Did I bring it back? I hope I did.
I think you did, yeah.
But again, I think that God is big enough to be found in all of that. And, even when we get distracted and off the topic, like, I think that he can still be used and shown through us, even if we mess up and aren't always perfect in how we do things. But It's always kind of one of those where it's like trying not to judge others, because I don't know their story and I don't know their journey. I don't know where they're coming from. But judging my heart and trying to keep my eyes fixed on Jesus in the end is the only place I can go with that. So, yeah. Was that the message of Joseph? Probably not. Was that some of the little things that,
Not just any dream will do. It's got to be from God.
Mm-hmm.
No? Okay.
No.
Yeah.
Ultimately, that's it.
Yeah.
Because that's where they end with Joseph, is that it's, they're taking it to a very kind of shallow, basic level of, this is an inspiring story that if you just have a dream, that you can accomplish that dream. And it's like, no, this was not Joseph's dream.
He never would have seen
not
himself in this situation. He never could have imagined that this journey would have happened. So it actually was God turning a nightmare into a dream.
There was a great deal of humility that he learned from the very beginning, that we didn't see him growing in humility and wisdom throughout the course of this play. Like, I think that he really did in real life.
And no wonder he was such a great, what does Jesus say? Those who have shown obedience with little will be given much. Well, he became the head of Potiphar's household, the head servant, and he showed honor even when his honor was besmirched. And then he's the second in command to somebody way above Potiphar, and in all of Egypt, second only to the king. So for me, it's not like you're just rocking up to the top. It's showing humility and obedience and dedication to God's standards. Joseph wasn't going to let the culture of Egypt change him. He was going to stay in God's standard, no matter if he's in Potiphar's household or not. and he paid for that. So his dedication to following God's standards and obedience and humility is where got him where he needed to be. Not any kind of special talent. Any gift that God gave, like the dreams or anything like that, or interpretation, that was a present from God.
One thing I don't think that we really think about when we think about Joseph's story is how difficult when you are alone in a foreign country and a completely different culture. Because, some of the way that they portrayed Egypt, I look at it as, oh, well, maybe that wasn't tastefully done with the costuming and that kind of stuff. But the reality of it is it probably was way worse as far as the culture that he found himself in. Egyptian culture was really bad. It was very pagan, and the costume, the dresses that they wore were probably even scantier than what they showed in the movie. And for somebody, for a Hebrew to be all alone, you see, we talked about Daniel. Daniel had other friends that had been taken into captivity
True.
with him.
True.
At that point, with Joseph, there was no one else. He was alone in this foreign country. It would have been very easy for him to have forgotten everything.
And to dilute his faith.
Right. The fact that we see him maintaining his standards of purity, resisting Potiphar's wife, how easy would it have been for him to give in?
Right.
And that was something that, the Hebrew culture that he was raised in was very, very different. The food that they ate, all of their standards of behavior, that it was vastly different. And the fact that he held on to and maintained that while being completely alone in Egypt is huge. I don't think that we really talk about that very much. That in order for God to use him, he was put through just, the trial of being alone and maintaining his beliefs in his, purity and just all of the things that it meant to be a Hebrew, all alone in a foreign country that was very godless.
Yeah.
Very pagan. And it's quite amazing just how difficult that would have been.
Yeah.
Anyway. So, all I have to say, some good, some bad, some yes ands.
Yeah.
Yes, and
Yeah.
we hope that you will join us back. I think that next week is going to be going into a lot more, because there's a lot more to say about Jesus Christ Superstar. So that'll be
going
fun.
to be like an apologetics debate. On one side, you're going to have the musical saying, this is what we think Jesus' journey is. And on the other side, you have an apologist going, nay, nay.
The question is, will we be able to find anything good? We were able to find some good in Joseph. Will we be able to find anything good in Jesus Christ Superstar? Hope you join us next week. We'll find out. Bye.